Good morning, kiddos. Today we're going to start our review of the objectives that we covered this year, our standards. This is going to be a review that you're going to need to be able to go over during the summer right before you start sixth grade to help refresh your memory on the content that we covered. Today we're going to be starting on the page that looks like this, Number and Operations in Base 10. So please turn to that page. I know it says trifold, but we're not going to worry about folding it at this time. We're just going to worry about going through and getting it completed. Now, right here at the bottom of the page, it says learning goal. I can add, subtract, multiply, and divide decimals to hundredths. I can explain using concrete models or drawings. This space right here is supplied for you to be able to rewrite the learning goal if you need to. I would prefer that you just read it a couple times to yourself and be able to say, yes, I know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide decimals to hundredths. I can explain using concrete models or drawings. I want you to know how to do those things in your way, not necessarily the way that a question asks you to using a certain method, but I want to know that you can get to an answer. Before we begin, we're going to take a couple notes on how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions. So please take out a sheet of paper, pause the video while you do that, and we will resume in just a moment. Before we begin our fractions page for today, I want to make sure that we review some things. These are types of fractions. Remember that when we talk about a fraction, this is the key to it. It's equal parts of a whole. Those parts have to be the same size, but then when we're comparing two wholes of something, let's say if I'm comparing 2/4 of a pizza and a half of another pizza, trying to figure out which is bigger, then the two pizzas have to be the same size also. Those are important keys to remember. So now let's look. When we talk about a unit fraction is just what we would consider right here to be a normal fraction. That's where your numerator is smaller than your denominator. And its numerator is always going to be 1. This is just to say that it is a single part of that fraction. Then we go to that proper fraction. This is a fraction whose numerator is less than the denominator, less than the whole. So where this can be, this is made up of 4 parts of a unit fraction. This is like having 4 1/5 laying there. Then we have an improper fraction, and that's where your numerator is larger than your denominator, and it's more than 1. It can be more than 2. It can be more than any whole number. That's what makes it improper. And then you have a mixed number. That's where you have your whole number and then your fraction. If you need to pause and write down any of these notes, please do. These are important notes to remember. We often don't use the term unit fraction or proper fraction. We just call it a fraction and go on. But you may need to know those two terms. I know that you are familiar with improper fraction and mixed numbers. Let's go to this next page. The next page is very important. This is rules for fractions. This right here is for the addition. Notice it says same denominator. This page goes through and breaks it down just so that you can see what you're supposed to be doing. We see that you have a B on both of the bottom, the denominators. So it means it would be the same denominator. So you come over here and you have the same denominator. And you just add the two numerators. Subtraction with the same denominator, Same thing happens. You keep the same denominator and then you subtract the numerators in the order that it's given in the problem. So it's A subtract C. And so over here you do A subtract C. Then we have multiplication. You just multiply straight across. You have A times C and then B times D. And that's how you get your numerator and your denominator. And then you simplify. And then we have addition with different denominators. Notice that they show to multiply right here. They're showing you how to go about getting the getting the common denominator. That's what they're trying to do. Then right here I have subtraction with different denominators. And then I have division. Division is the one that most children struggle with. We come straight across here. Remember that when we would do this in class, we would say AB divided by CD. So then we would circle this part and we would say AB times, and this is the reciprocal. You need to remember the word reciprocal. And then you turn it upside down. See how this is CD? Here we have DC. And then we multiply straight across. A times D and then B times C. All right, I would like for you to find number 1 on your paper, and we will begin in just a moment. All right, the next set of notes that we need to keep in mind are the rules of decimals. We have addition and subtraction, which just line the decimals up. Make sure your decimals are in place directly above one another, just like this and just like this. You may put a 0 as a placeholder as needed, and then just add or subtract as normal. With multiplication, you write down your multiplication problem, you solve it whichever way that you normally would, and when you get your answer wrote out, see where it says 3 decimal places and 2 decimal places? This is saying look at the smallest value that you have. The smallest value here is thousandths times hundredth. So 1,000th times 100th gives you 100,000th. So you would show 5 decimal places. Now with division, we look and we have 3/10 will go into 1 and 41/100ths how many times. So the first thing that we do is we are going to multiply this by 10 by moving the decimal 1 place to the right to make it a whole number, and then we do the same thing here. So we move it 1 decimal place to the right, which means we've multiplied it by 10, and we can come directly above and go ahead and put our decimal. So it's going to look like this. 3 will go into 14 and 1/10. So you just move it straight up, and then you forget about it, and you divide like normal. Now, for the next, for the 10 problems, like down here on, I believe it's this one, it says use the decimal model to check. You don't have to use the decimal model. I want you to know how to get the answer. What I care about is what you write on this line minus the use of a calculator. That's a no-go. I want you to solve them. I will give you the answers in just a moment. And if you didn't get the problem right, I want you to go back and look at it and figure out what happened and how you can make it right. Pause the video now and do the problems, and then come back and visit in just a moment. You can hear me as I solve these problems. I'm just going to talk about them and solve the problems so that you can see how I went about it. So I'm going to line my decimals up. I'm going to go ahead and put a decimal here, and I'm going to put that placeholder 0 there, and then I'm just going to add. 5 plus 7 is 12. I carry that, and it's 1 and 24 hundredths. Next page, find the sum. So I'm going to line my decimals up. I don't have to do a placeholder. I put my 0, 1 and 13 hundredths. Okay, find the value of the expression. I have a subtraction problem, so I am just going to line my decimals up. I don't have any placeholders, so here I go. I'm going to do, I could borrow, it's going to end up being the same type of problem here, because see, it was 18 anyway, and then if I took the decimal out, so I just moved that over, and it's going to leave me with 9/10. I didn't have to do that, but I did for your sake. Find the product of 3 times 4/10. So I'm going to ignore that decimal. I do 3 times 4 is 12. I look at right here, I have a 1 place times a tenth, which means in my answer I need to show a tenth. So I have 1 and 2 tenths. Here I have 5 tenths times 8 tenths. I'm going to ignore my decimals, and I'm going to look at it as 5 times 8, and that is 40. I'm going to ignore the whole zero process thing and just look at it as 5 times 8, just as if these weren't there. And so then I look at here, and I have a tenth times the smallest place value here, which is a tenth. That leaves me with 100. So in my answer, I need to show 100. I could look at this as 40 hundredths, or I can look at it as 4 tenths. That is equivalent and equal. Right here, find the product. Now this is 4 times 3 and 52 hundredths. I'm going to flip it around to make it a little easier for me to work with, because, you know, potatoes, 2 times 4 and 4 times 2 is the same thing. So I'm going to write it this way. It does not hurt to flip my multiplication around. So I do 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 5 is 20. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 2 is 14. Now I look at my smallest place value. Here I have 100, and I'm multiplying that times 1's place. That leaves me with 100th, which means in my answer I must show 100th, which is 2 decimal places. So my answer is 14 and 800ths. What is the value of the expression 1 and 5/10 divided by 3? So here I have 3 will go into 1 and 5/10. I just move my decimal up and I forget it. 3 will not go into 1, but 3 will go into 15. 5 times 3 is 15, and my answer is 5/10. I do not need to use the decimal model unless I just want to. It will actually take me longer to do.